we'll start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. So, my name is Jayantha. I'm a 36-year-old lay Buddhist disciple of the Theravada tradition. Getting very close to going into the monastery and seeing if the monastic life is for me. My date is set now for September 7th. So that's about as much time as I have left to be here at the Buddha Center. And any time I have afterwards, I have no idea. We'll have to figure out what happens. But, so we are here today, so we continue. I wanted to talk about a topic that is often overshadowed, but that is very important and is a large part of the practice of the Dhamma Vinaya. The Buddha didn't call the teaching Buddhism. He called it the Dhamma Vinaya. And the can you not hear me, Buffy? Oh wait, I don't know. Okay, so, and he taught, if you read the suttas, there's a lot of information you can glean from the suttas. The Buddha did not teach one thing for everybody. He taught to the level of the person. And each of his teachings, each of the suttas, are to a specific person or group of people in a specific time and in a specific place. So he knew that not everybody, he's not going to be able to say, this is the Four Noble Truths, and people are going to say, okay, well, yeah, I kind of understand that. He knew there's going to be people of all types and all levels of awakening, and the full practice, those of you who hear me talk, you hear me use the term the practice often, and for most people, when you hear the practice, you think automatically meditation. But the Buddha's practice was much more than that. For those who had a lot of dust in their eyes, or who the Buddha thought would not understand the deeper teachings, there was a starting place. That starting place was generosity, dana, giving of money, food, time, whatever, to monks, to people in your community, just giving. The practice of giving. That practice of giving opens up the heart, opens up the compassion and the mind to move further on in the practice. So, in the suttas, the Buddha will talk about what is the proper way. How should a householder being somebody who has a family, how should a householder, what is their responsibility? How do they live well? And it's always taking care, being respectful of your parents, of your spouse, of your children, all of these kind of things. And so then that is the next step. After dana is sila. Sila is translated as morality. And of course, when we as Westerners hear morality, there's all kinds of things that kind of pop into our heads. Different definitions of morality, different concepts and contexts of morality. If you had a Christian or a Catholic background like myself, you might think of that like the Ten Commandments, these kind of things. And if you look at the very basic morality is the 5 precepts. Is there anybody who's not familiar with the 5 precepts? Oh, good, because I wasn't planning on making this a talk on the 5 precepts, because that is a whole other talk. But the 5 precepts are what the Buddha called faultless gifts to all beings. The Buddha called them faultless gifts because you are practicing living a life of sila, of that virtue, moral life. This is practicing living a life that is skillful. See, I'm not a big fan of the whole fault. Like you, if you follow these 5 precepts, no being can give fault to you. These are faultless gifts. So, yeah. Not following the 5 precepts is a thoughtless gift. But, so, going back to my train of thought, if I can find it again. But we're talking about, right? Well, it's good for clarification. You cannot have right understanding if you don't have right hearing, or if you can't hear, understand somebody's accent. So these precepts are the basic of Buddhist morality. Now there are more precepts, but the 5 precepts are what the Buddha taught. It's for people who could not, they would not be able to understand the deeper teachings because they were living a life that was not skillful. I don't like to use the word good and bad or good and evil. It doesn't fit within Buddhism. There's many Christian translations of terms in Buddhism that for me doesn't fit. So when we're talking about morality, we're talking about virtue, living a virtuous life, a wholesome life. Wholesome is a good word, and that is a word that you'll often hear different teachers use. When you are trying to follow sila, you're trying to follow a life, you're trying to perform actions of thought, word, and deed that are skillful instead of unskillful. And skillful is defined as actions that are beneficial both to yourself and others. That do not bring unskillful actions are those actions that bring unbeneficial or harming results to yourself and others. And this is intertwined with meditation. And the way the path is often called, there's 3 words that come together: sila, samadhi, and Panna. Sila, we already know, is that virtue. Day in and day out, trying to live a life, making choices that are skillful and beneficial and wholesome. Samadhi is that stillness, that concentration. Samadhi is where the meditation comes in. And when you have both sila and samadhi, that's where Panna comes in. Panna is wisdom, insight. These 3 things are connected. This is one of the things that I feel often that is lost in a secularized kind of meditation, a secularized kind of Buddhism, where you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, in that this is a large part of what the Buddha taught. The reason being, in that you can only go so far in your meditation practice if you are not practicing sila. If you are not, if you are performing actions that you have regrets about, that you have worries about, of revenge or whatever, you know, if you are performing actions that are always bringing up thoughts in your mind, that your mind cannot be calm and peaceful, well then how can you expect to really get into the deeper states of meditation? It's impossible. So this is the point, and the funny thing about it is that they are connected, just like I said, sila, samadhi, panna, because the more you meditate, or the more you practice that virtue, the easier it is to meditate, and the more you meditate, the more you see things as they truly are. You understand. You say, well, why would I want to do that? That hurts myself. That hurts other people. And so, because you start to see things as they truly are, you start to gain that wisdom, that panna, the insight. Then you say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that again. Why would I do that? Why would I steal? Why would I hurt somebody? And so, it's just a circle, right? And so, the meditation helps you live more virtuous, which helps you get deeper into meditation. Circular, circular, circular. They are connected, they help each other, they run circles with each other, all leading to wisdom. And going back to what Buffy was saying about what the 5 precepts are. The 5 precepts are, like I said, those 5 faultless gifts. And the first one is the non-harming of beings. It's often translated as no killing, not killing. And if you're coming from from a Christian background, you say, oh, isn't that's like the I don't know, is that 3rd or 4th commandment? I don't remember. Catholic schoolboy is forgetting the levels of his commandments. So yeah, okay, so no killing. Okay, I understand that. It really does go deeper than that. If you're trying to, the very basics is no killing. Just don't kill. Some people are at that level. It's like, okay, I'm just not going to kill humans. Of course, it gets deeper to that. The ultimate part of that, the ultimate level of that, is the non-harming of beings. Not even swatting ants or flies or mosquitoes or these kind of things. You wouldn't want to. There's no point in doing that. Why would you want to harm another being? But see that you meet the practice where you start, where you are. So the next one is the not taking what is not given. So it's obviously not stealing. And this is another one. See, all of these precepts are not black and white. There's no such thing as black and white in Buddhism. They all have a variety of levels. They all fit, all of these precepts are up to the person to implement them is part of your practice and meeting it where you're at. Let's see. Well, I'll get to that point. So the third precept is the wow, why am I going a blank? See, I follow the precepts, I don't even have to remember them. The third precept is the non-harming, not non-harming, sexual misconduct. Now, see, it's interesting because it's often translated as sexual misconduct, and it's often also translated as no adultery. But many teachers talk about the true meaning of this precept, which is actually no sensual misconduct. And sensuality is, in the Buddhist, if you look up sensual in the dictionary, it's a little different than when we think of sensuality, like in TV and pop culture. We think of like sexy kind of, these kinds of, oh, she's very sensual, sensual lips, etc. But sensuality, in the original definition and in Buddhism, we're talking about of the senses. Hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, of the senses. Overeating is sensual misconduct. Possibly listening to loud music too much, hurting your ears, sensual misconduct. It goes much deeper than just sexual misconduct. But in the interest of explaining the more general term of sexual misconduct is basically any kind of sexual act that is non-consensual and or that harms a person or somebody else. And we use the example of adultery. Adultery, you have two people, they might be consenting, but even though they're consenting, they're still harming that third person. Now, if it's if they're swingers or whatever, and they all consent to it, all the couples, then that's a different story. That's a consent. But if there's a person who's involved that is not consenting, that person is harmed. And not only is that person harmed, but the children are most likely harmed, because there's an issue, there's conflict, possibly divorce, all of these things that that can cause, and back in the day, we're talking 2,600 years ago, disrupting a family is a huge thing. I mean, it just did not happen. It was a very big thing 2,600 years ago. Today, 60% of people get divorced. This happens, that happens. Everybody, 30 years ago, somebody not having a father was a big thing. They might not have be the only person in the school. These days, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, all these people don't have fathers too. So, but that's a bit of an aside. Yes, the Buddha was. Especially when he allowed women to be monastics. Oh my God. All the Brahmins and everybody's like, all the women are going to be monastics. They're supposed to be dealing with the family and all these things. It was an interesting thing that was done there. But correct, yeah. Well, he broke up his own family in a way. That's true. I think it's a little different. This was a time his family was royalty, so he didn't leave the family, destitute or anything like that. But it is a valid criticism that many people have of the Buddha, that he did that, and the traditional answer is, he left to seek awakening, to seek a way out for all beings out of compassion. And it makes sense that somebody who has compassion for all beings is beyond romantic marital relationship, and all that kind of stuff. And in the stories, the father, who was the king, the mother, the son Rahula, they all became monastics and they all became enlightened. So I think that's a pretty good deal. I don't think that's a you lost a father figure, but you became awakened. So I'd take that, no problem. So, but it is a valid criticism. Depends on how you look at it. So getting back to the 5 precepts. So this is another thing. The 4th precept being refraining from incorrect speech. Incorrect speech being, thought of as lying. But again, it goes deeper than that. Harsh speech, gossip speech, all of these things. Speech that is unskillful and unbeneficial to yourself and others. And of course, the final one, which is one that a lot of people have issues with, have troubles with, often overlook, and that is to refrain from intoxicating drinks and drugs that cause heedlessness. And that is something that, again, is at levels. There, you might start out with saying, wanting to be moderate in drink, and it might get to the point where you say, I don't need it anymore. There's no point to it. The great thing about these precepts is that they are not thou shalt not. In the translation is undertaking the training rule. These are suggestions by the Buddha of the basic sila to practice if you want to follow the path of Dhamma. There is no confession in Buddhism. There's no, I broke the rule, now I'm not a Buddhist anymore, and I should hold my head down in shame and go into the woods and never be seen again. There's no such thing. The only confession in Buddhism is done by monks. That's it, and that's a whole different story. And again, is nothing like what if you're a Christian or Catholic background, confession and the Christian tradition. So these are rules that you are taking on of your own volition, fully understanding that you are not perfect. You will break these rules, but you want to continue to try to do better day by day. All of this practice, the sila, the virtuous living, and the meditation practice, it's all, the reason why they call it a practice is because it's a practice. You are going to suck at it for a long time, even many years. And then eventually you get better, gradually getting better and better and better, living a more skillful life, having deeper insights. The Buddha used the analogy of, just as the ocean has a gradual slope to a sudden drop off, this is how awakening happens. It's a gradual slope of practice. Continuous practice, continuous effort of that morality, that virtuous living, and that meditation practice. Not giving up. Not guilting yourself, being judgmental of yourself and negative of yourself because you had a beer or because you killed a bug, or because you lied. These are not rules. The Buddha didn't say you have to follow these or else you're a bad person, or you're going to go to hell, or anything like that. That's not what the Buddha said. So that's why, for me personally, I thought it was very freeing, very uplifting part of the practice when I came to understand, when I came to, really start to delve deeper into what the Buddha was teaching and what is really all part of the practice. Meditation is great. Meditation is what's going to get you that insight. Meditation is, to get that insight, you're going to have to practice. But the meditation is supported by your virtue. They say, if you're familiar at all with the monks and deep levels of meditation, you have monks that have all kinds of powers, like reading people's minds and being able to see things and hear things and all these kind of powers. And you don't get to those levels without that, virtue, without that practice. Could you imagine if you could do all that and then, use those in wrong ways? That would be pretty bad. You could use that, monks that can read people's minds. Could you imagine using that if you were an unskillful person? If you were a person who did not live a skillful life? It would be very harmful to yourself and others. So, if you want to have that, create that better life for yourself, to follow the Buddha's message of peace and transformation, then that's part of the practice. And it's just every day, little by little. There's another part of the sutra that says, just as a bucket, drop by drop, is filled, so too does a person, drop by drop, performing good actions, fills themselves with goodness. Every day we make decisions, we can make choices that affect not only ourselves but others. And I made a post on my blog today about an experience that happened yesterday that reaffirmed something that I had learned. Sometimes you learn that you have these insights, but then not that you forget about them, but that you have other experiences that remind you, oh yeah, I remember that insight. Now, I had my job now is a foster parent recruiter. I do try to recruit foster parents, adoptive parents, and I host events and I do speaking engagements and all of these kind of things. And yesterday, I was running around like a madman, making sure I had the catering, food, and all the things that I needed for this event. And I ran in to get I forgot ice, and I forgot a bowl to put the ice in. So I ran into a dollar store to get this, and I only had a bowl and tongs. And of course, what happens when you're in a rush, when you're busy, right? There's always a person in front of you who has a million things and is slow, and there's all kinds of issues. And so when you and so you're in a rush and you're anxious, and all of a sudden, okay, so how do you treat that, right? You don't even, in your mind, there's a battlefield. Oh, this person, I can't believe this person. Why does this person need cigarettes? Why does this person need that? Why does this person need that? That is the beginning. It all comes from the mind. The first line of the Dhammapada, all things are mind wrought. All things come from the mind. So how you act verbally and physically stem from your mind. So when I got behind this lady, and for that split second I started to have that, of course, but then I laughed because I just know it always happens that way. And when you start to see how life is, you can do nothing but laugh, because it's almost like there is somebody or something saying, oh, we're going to screw with this guy right now. Wait, this is what's going to happen. And you take it as a lesson, right? So it's like I had a little anxiety, and I had a timeline. I wanted to get back because I had to set up and this and that, and I'm sweating because it's 90 something degrees, and I'm making sure I should have gave myself more time. But I was able to take time. Okay, peace. So I just waited, and it was done. So then it took 2 seconds for me to ring my thing up, and I'm walking out the door, and I hear the woman in front of me. She wasn't an elderly woman, but she was an older woman, maybe close to 50, a little slow moving their cart and all this. And I'm almost out the door, and I hear the cashier say to the woman, "You forgot your item." And being a nice guy, is like, okay, and this is all happening split second in my mind. I said, okay, I'm just gonna tell her, ma'am, she's saying you forgot your item. And I took a step to walk to my car, because I'm busy. I got to invent, I got people coming, I got to talk, we got to do all this stuff. And then a split second I said, you know what? No. It'll take me 2 seconds to just run in there real quick, grab the item, give it to the woman. Because this woman is going to she has to turn her cart around, and she's making... So... I got the item, I gave it to the woman. She was kind of surprised, and she smiled, and she thanked it. And I said, oh, you're welcome. And I just, right to my car, and out. And, that's an example of the kind of decisions, the kind of choices you can make every day. I'm a big believer in there's no such thing as there's no time. I don't believe in that. And Ajahn Chah didn't believe that either. He says if you have time to breathe, you have time to meditate. But I am a firm believer, because I've seen it, I experienced it, that you waste more time being anxious than you do if you did that good deed. And you know what happened after I did that for that woman? I felt good about myself. I felt, I did a good thing. And guess what? That brought me peace. That brought me calm. I went from running around calm, and after that, I was fine. And of course, I got back on time. It didn't take me but literally 3 seconds to do what I did. And you see the benefit from doing that. That is an experience, that is something that is helpful to your meditation. Whereas, if I went through that experience, and maybe while I was waiting online, I made a comment, or some people make these verbal kind of exasperations, or they you're in that experience, and you hear the woman, and I'm like, oh, screw that woman, I'm busy. And I just, I don't even say, hey, this woman's trying to, the cashier's trying to call you. What does that do to your mind? And later you're trying to do meditation, and you think, oh, man, I was such in a rush, and I feel bad. because I should have helped that woman, but I didn't. That's an example of this virtuous living in process. This is an example of how this runs with your meditation practice. You are doing the best you can in whatever situations that you're put in. And because you are doing the best that you can, you don't have all of these negativity and regrets and thoughts that hold you back. And again, I like to say those words, doing the best you can in the situation that you're given. Because that parallels the concept of the precepts being training rules. You are training. You are given these situations in life. And you can take them as lessons. And you can make your decisions and look at those decisions. Was this something that was beneficial to myself and others? Was it something that was unskillful? And you could say, well, from now on I'm going to try to do this different. I'm going to try to do that different. I liked what I did there. That was a good thing. That's fine. So it's every day we make those decisions. We always have a choice. We always have a choice. The Buddha said that. We always have a choice. We always have a choice. And some people think karma is predetermined. That everything that happens to us because we were bad in a former life, and oh well, we're just screwed. Buddha said that is false. That is not karma. What the Buddha did say was that while we might not have a decision in what happens to us, things that happen in life, we have the ability to make those decisions. We always have that choice to take whatever happens to us and how we react to that and how we embrace that. We have the choice. We have the ability to do that. And even if you think you're Mother Teresa or Gandhi or whatever, is that you do good things, there's always something more to do. There's always a good thing to happen. And they teach you these lessons. So that's why it is important. It's an important part of the practice, this virtuous living. And it's a part of the practice that the Buddha spoke of on many, many occasions in the suttas. It is the full depth and breadth of the practice. Not just the meditation, sitting there, observing your breath, but living the Dhamma. When you have that virtuous living, you're living the Dhamma as well as practicing it. You're living metta. You're practicing it in your meditation, but then you're living it. And I'm a big proponent of the understanding that the person's reaction to whatever kind deed that you do, or whatever good thing that you do, does not diminish the deed that you did. The karma that you build is not based on the person's reaction. You did a good thing. The person liked it. Okay, so you get more karma. The person didn't like it. The person didn't acknowledge it. Okay, so you get less karma. There's no such thing as that. How often in life do we maybe let people in traffic, or we hold the door for somebody. And what do? They ignore us. They act like we don't even exist, let alone give us a thank you. And how do we feel when that happens? We get angry inside. Those bleepity bleeps, I did this nice thing, and they didn't even acknowledge it. Right? That's where, what was the topic last week? Expectations. We have the expectation that we do a good thing, and we at least get a thank you, or we get something in return. That's not true generosity. That's not true virtue. It's doing something for the sake of doing it. And you'd be surprised. You don't know what those deeds do to people. The things that you do, the choices that you make, you'll most likely never know what they do. Sometimes you will. You know, I, as somebody who worked in child protective services, you know, I can think of an example of, you know, very few examples of the hundreds of families that I worked with. I can think of only maybe one or two examples where I was able to see that I helped somebody, and they understand that. You know, they understand that there was somebody there, that the decisions I made was beneficial to them as a worker. You know, I remember this little girl. Well, she's, I think, 12 or 13. I was there when she was removed from her mother, and I wasn't her worker, but I spent a lot of time with her, doing a lot of things, helping out the worker. I remember flying a kite with her, trying to fly a kite. I've never been good at that. And just you know, being kind to her, and you know, all the things that I did. And years later, this is going back maybe 4 months, I saw her again, and I always felt a real empathy for this child. And I said, "Hi," you know, I said her name, and she looked at me, and I was like, "Do you remember me?" And she's like, "No." And I felt a little pang. Oh, that's crappy. Like, I felt, oh man, you know, because I had this connection with this little girl. But I saw her again a couple weeks later, and I said again, "Do you remember me?" And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "No." And then I knew that what I had done with her and for her, she remembered those years later. And she even told her worker about that. She would ask about me. She's like, "Oh, how's Joe doing?" You know. And so you can do these things that you never know what your actions will do for others. And you shouldn't expect that they will acknowledge those actions, because it's not about that. It's about the performing of the action. So when you perform those actions, you're doing them just for the hell of it, just for goodness sake. I'm going to do this because it makes me feel good. It's helpful to somebody else. And if they don't, you know, if it doesn't register with them, that's fine. I know in my heart that I did it. I feel good about it. And that's that. So I've been speaking a little bit over the half-hour mark, which I guess sometimes I tend to do, yammer on. But I don't like to hear myself talk for too long. So I guess that's about all I can say at this point. If we have any comments or questions, we can move into the question and answer period. And if there's nothing, then we can end. That's a good point, Buffy. That's a very good point. And I think that's a good starting point too, because if you have the more confidence in the practice that you have, the more you have a feeling of self-worth. No matter if you do something for somebody or not, you have that feeling of self-worth. But when you start that doing the generosity and the skillful deeds, that is a way of building that self-worth. That's a very good point. Because in Buddhism, every time we're talking about being kind to beings, we're talking about including ourselves as well. And in the West, we are very adept at downing ourselves, avoiding ourselves, throwing ourselves under the bus. And it doesn't do anything but harm us. All beings wish to be happy. All beings wish to be peaceful. All beings wish to live in friendship. That's just the way it is. That is metta, which we will be doing on Thursday. So nothing is black and white, right? Nothing is black and white. And that's why it's complicated. You'll on Buddhist forums, Buddhist questions you'll hear. Is downloading music theft? Is that breaking the third precept? Or you're here, I have bed bugs in my house. Is that breaking the first precept? Life is never cut and dry. We have to make those decisions on our own. Right? We have to make those decisions. What's best for us? What's best for our families? What's best for all beings? The important part is not sitting in judgment of yourself about it. Whatever your decision is. Whatever happened in your past, you can always make the decision. You always have the choice to do better the next day. Always. I think that's one of my new mottos, is you always have a choice. You always have a choice. Always. Yep. We feel we're powerless sometimes. But we have more power locked up inside us than we ever imagined. It's there. We just have to let it shine out. We just have to harness it in a skillful manner, instead of hiding it down in the dungeon. It's already there. And we have the choice to keep it down in the dungeon, or we have the choice to bring it out into the light. Okay. So I guess unless there's any more comments or questions, we can end here. We'll do metta on Thursday. I don't know if it's been announced, but we are not Sunday. I'm not doing the Basics of Buddhism class anymore, anything like that, because as we're coming close to the end, to me leaving, the weekends are pretty busy, so we're not doing that anymore. Okay, good. But Thursday is, let's see, this is 6 p.m. SLT, so Thursday is 5:30 SLT. Yeah. So I think once I leave, I mean, obviously I'll be coming back every couple months. I'll work out something with Delani, maybe just come for a visit on Second Life. Becoming a monk and going under a teacher and all that, I highly doubt I'll be able to do stuff like this. We'll have to see. But I'm going to be a student for at least 7 years, because the monks are independents for 5 years of a teacher. After 5 years, they are considered capable of being able to, basically go out on their own. And then after 10 years, they're considered capable of being a teacher to other monks and stuff like that. So it'll be probably quite a long time before I do any kind of teaching to that regard. But since Second Life has been important in my experiences, I'd love to be able to come on every once in a while, even if it's just for a meet and greet kind of thing, and talk about my experiences and all that. So September 7th is the date. My last day of work is going to be August 23rd, but I'm still going to be around, and so probably September 5th will be like the last day I'm on Second Life, somewhere's around there. While the monastery is Wi-Fi connected, it's a different thing to have a program like this. I don't know, but we'll all have to figure it out and find out what's going to happen. I'm torn between wanting to go into the woods and never having the internet again, and being on the internet. I always have those two things. So I want to be on the internet because I know a lot of people want to follow my journey, and that it actually brings benefit to people, which is okay. That's fine. But when I go to the monastery, I'm so used to turning off my phone, not having any internet or anything like that, and just being in the woods, nice and peaceful. Yes, yeah, I'll keep my blog up, definitely. The monastics that I know of, they're encouraged to keep a journal and to post online and stuff like that. It's part of the new way of how things go, which I think is important, especially for Westerners. As there are more and more monastics who are Western, I think Western Buddhists can feel a bit more of a connection in that regard. And even the Bhante Silananda, who was one of the Sri Lankan monks at Bhavana Society, we were in a walk probably about a year and a half ago, and he said that it was sometimes stuff gets lost in translation, and sometimes it's easier for a Westerner to connect with another Westerner in that regard. the way it works is that the first year I would be a lay person. Then the second year I would be a novice monk. And so at the end of that 2 years, that's when I would have the full ordination. So it's going to be quite a while before I get to full ordination, if that is something that I make it to. I'm taking it day by day. It's something that I feel I'm already reading the Vinaya. I have 2 different versions. It's very interesting. What I like the most about the Vinaya is and for those of you who don't know, the Vinaya is the rules for the monastics. 227 for men, I think 331 for women. The interesting thing about the Vinaya is that